British culture, as Stephen Bush elaborates in the Financial Times piece today, remains an enigmatic force frequently invoked, yet rarely defined with clarity by political figures like Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick. It's something elusive, something intangible, something evanescent, something ephemeral. And Bush highlights that while both Badenoch and Jenrick emphasize the preservation of British culture, they often fall short of explaining what it truly entails, what it actually is. This is, of course, not for lack of existence. British culture is a robust tapestry, yet defining it concisely is inherently challenging because of its evolution over centuries and its continuous transformation. Its transformation, actually, for the most part, because of immigration. Bush points out that British culture isn't reducible to a monolithic set of values or practices. Instead, it's always been a blend, shaped by influences both domestic and foreign. While Badenoch and Jenrick's musings on culture might suggest they view it as a static artifact under threat, British culture is more like a river, altered, enriched by every new tributary that joins it, and as Heraclitus would say, you can't step in it twice. In fact, it's this adaptability, rather than any single trait, that underpins its resilience and its allure. From rock and roll in the 1950s to the social movements of today, British culture has continuously borrowed, adapted, and transformed itself. From seeing Tommy Steele, the little white bull man, in Panto, to seeing him playing Scrooge I think in the same theatre, if I remember correctly, in the Palladium. Bush observes that British culture is imbued. I'm not suggesting Tommy Steele sums up British culture, by the way, but Bush suggests that British culture is imbued with distinct, albeit sometimes trivial, elements like understatement, scatological humour, as opposed to eschatological humour, and an obsession with class. And one of my fellow YouTubers did actually call me the other day and said, let's do a piece on class together. And I haven't done so, partly because I've been ill, but I will take him up on that. I think it's a good idea, because class is equally elusive. These characteristics are often recognised in British media and entertainment, while remain emblematic of the nation's identity. And when we're looking to define culture, often we look to the ephemeral, we look to the television, we look to the theatre. These things that are here today, gone tomorrow. And for instance, the differences between the British version of The Office and its American counterpart reveal more than just a different sense of humour. They demonstrate a unique world view informed by British cultural sensibilities that are steeped in poking fun at ourselves and irony. And the cultural differences also highlight Bush's point that despite globalization, the local flavour remains integral to British identity. The BBC, a long-standing pillar of British culture, exemplifies the institutional backbone necessary for sustaining this unique identity. Bush argues that while the BBC faces political scrutiny and budget cuts, it remains indispensable for preserving and promoting British culture. The funding of public broadcasting, akin to France's support for its own cultural institutions and its language, is seen as essential for cultivating a distinctive cultural output that might otherwise be overshadowed by globalized content and a common language which we share, which indeed in many ways we invented. Bush makes a compelling case that while British culture may thrive in the liberal values of tolerance and autonomy, it still requires the BBC's touch to retain its unique accent. In the past, we could have relied on the theatre and we could have relied on the church, but not so much now. Now we must turn to the BBC. Thus, as Bush aptly concludes, British culture is not an entity that can be summed up in a slogan or a list, no matter how much Jenrick and Badenoch may appeal for something like that. It's not as much about the quirks and the ice cream with the 99 thing. It's the nuances, but it's the broader principles of liberalism and tolerance and adaptability and borrowing and assuming. While many bemoan the dilution of Britishness in a globalised world, that's exactly what we've been doing. Really, since 1066, we've been diluting ourselves and spreading ourselves and identifying ourselves by this little cocktail of quirkiness. Perhaps it's precisely this capacity to absorb and transform, super absorbent, now with wings, to transform influences that makes British culture both enduring and endearing. And I think if we don't endear, then we don't really have any value. I find myself occasionally having to explain what panto is, and I run into a certain amount of trouble. I find myself trying to explain where Oxford University is, and I find myself running into trouble. And it's that point where you have to experience it to appreciate it.